My mother sent me a birthday card every single year for 11 years straight, and I threw every single one away without opening them until the year the cards simply stopped coming and I finally understood what silence actually feels like. My name is Grace. I'm 34, and for most of my adult life, I believed I was the one who'd been wronged. I was wrong about almost everything. If you're the kind of person who's ever lost someone before, making things right with them, I think you'll understand this story more than most. And if stories like this move you the way they move me, stay until the end and consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel, because there are so many more stories like this one still waiting to be told. My mother, Diane, left when I was 8 years old. Not the version of leaving where someone disappears without explanation. She left because my father's drinking had become something none of us could survive living inside anymore. And the courts, back then, in a small town in Ohio, decided a struggling working mother without stable housing wasn't fit to keep custody of a child. I didn't understand any of that at 8 years old. All I understood was that one day my mother was there, and the next day she wasn't. And my father told me, in the cruelest way an angry man can tell an 8-year-old anything, that she hadn't fought hard enough to keep me. I believed him for 26 years. The cards started arriving when I was 9, one every year on my birthday. Sometimes with a small amount of cash inside, always with a handwritten note. My father made it very clear what he thought I should do with them. She made her choice, he did, tossing each envelope onto the kitchen counter like it was something contaminated. You don't owe her anything. So I didn't open them. Year after year, I dropped each unopened card straight into the trash, telling myself I was protecting something, when really I was just a hurting child, following the only guidance I had, no matter how damaged that guidance actually was. I grew up angry in a way I didn't fully understand until much later. Angry at a woman I'd convinced myself had abandoned me by choice. Angry enough that even as an adult, even after I'd moved away, gotten married, built an entire life of my own, I never once tried to find her. Never once questioned the story I'd been told as an 8-year-old by an unreliable narrator with every reason to lie. The card stopped when I turned 20. I didn't notice for almost 2 years. That's the part that still keeps me awake some nights. The fact that 11 years of consistent, quiet effort from a woman I'd never given a single chance simply ended, and I was too consumed by my own resentment to even register the silence that replaced it. I found out why 3 years ago, completely by accident, during a conversation with an aunt I rarely spoke to, my mother's older sister, Patricia, who I ran into at a wedding I almost didn't attend. She asked, gently, carefully, if I'd ever made peace with everything before my mother passed. I remember the exact way the room seemed to tilt sideways when she said that word, passed. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice already shaking, some part of me already understanding what I was about to hear before she said another word. She died 4 years ago, sweetheart, Patricia said, her face crumbling with the grief I clearly hadn't been invited to share in. Breast cancer. I assumed someone had told you. I assumed that's why the card stopped. I don't remember much of what happened immediately after that. I remember excusing myself from the wedding reception, sitting alone in my car in the parking lot for almost 2 hours, unable to drive, unable to fully process that the woman I'd spent 26 years being angry at had actually spent those same years fighting for a relationship I'd refused to even consider, right up until illness took the choice away from her entirely. Patricia told me everything over the following weeks, slowly, gently, clearly, worried about how much devastating truth I could absorb at once. My mother had fought for partial custody for years after the initial ruling and lost every single time, largely because my father had money for better lawyers and she didn't. She'd moved 3 times, trying to establish stable enough housing to reopen the custody case, working 2 jobs most of that decade. She'd sent those birthday cards every single year, not because it was easy, but specifically because it was the only thread of connection the courts hadn't managed to take away from her. The final card, the one I never got to see because I'd stopped checking the mail those last 2 years before her death, contained a letter far longer than any of the birthday notes that came before it. Patricia had kept a copy because my mother, sensing how sick she'd become, had asked her sister to hold on to it in case I ever wanted to read it someday. I asked to see it 3 days after that wedding, once I finally felt strong enough. Patricia met me at a coffee shop and handed me a single folded piece of paper that had clearly been read and reread many times before it ever reached me. "My dearest Grace," it began, "I don't know if you'll ever read this or any of the cards before it, but I need you to know I never stopped choosing you, even when the world made it impossible to prove that in any way you could actually see. I lost custody, but I never once lost the love I felt for you every single day since you were born. I'm sick now, sweetheart. Sicker than I probably have time left to fully accept. I don't say this to make you feel guilty. I say this because I need you to know, whenever you're ready to know it, that not one single birthday passed where I didn't think of you, wonder about the woman you were becoming, and hope that somehow, someday, you'd let me back into your life, even just a little. I love you completely, exactly as much today as I did the day you were born. I always did. I always will." I sat in that coffee shop, and I cried in a way I hadn't allowed myself to cry since I was 8 years old, watching my mother's car disappear down our driveway for what I believed, at the time, was the last time I'd ever see her. The grief that followed wasn't simple grief. It was grief tangled together with 26 years of unnecessary anger, guilt I didn't know how to fully carry, and a devastating awareness that I'd spent more than 2 decades punishing a woman for a choice she never actually made. I went through months of genuinely struggling to function normally, replaying every unopened card, every year I could have reached out and simply didn't, every assumption I'd built an entire relationship's absence around without ever once questioning if it was true. Patricia eventually helped me visit my mother's grave, something I'd never done, having not even known until that point which cemetery she was buried in. I stood there for almost an hour, unable to speak at first, surrounded by a silence that felt heavier than almost anything I'd ever experienced. "I'm sorry," I finally said out loud to a headstone that couldn't answer me back. "I'm so sorry I believed the version of you that was easiest to be angry at, instead of finding out who you actually were. I'm sorry it took losing you completely to finally understand what you'd been trying to tell me every single year, for 11 years straight. I visit that grave every year now, on my birthday, the same day those cards used to arrive when I was younger. I bring flowers, and I bring the letter, worn soft now, from how many times I've reread it, and I sit and I talk to her the way I wish I'd found the courage to do, while she was still alive to hear it. I also started something else, something I hope might matter to someone else out there, carrying similar resentment toward a parent they've lost touch with. I began writing letters back to my mother, one every year, telling her about my life, my marriage, the daughter I had 2 years ago, who I named Diane after her. I don't know if any of it reaches her in whatever way grief and love might still connect across that kind of distance. But writing them helps me carry something that used to feel entirely unbearable. If there's someone in your life you've been holding on to old resentment toward, someone whose full story you might not actually know, I hope this reaches you in time to ask the questions I never asked until it was far too late. Some silences aren't abandonment. Sometimes they're the sound of someone fighting a battle you never knew they were fighting, right up until the moment they simply couldn't fight it any longer. My daughter turned 2 last month. I held her on my lap and told her about her grandmother, a woman she'll never get to meet, but a woman whose love I've finally come to understand never once stopped reaching for me, even through 26 years of silence, I mistakenly built entirely myself.